Welcome to Behold, a podcast about beholding Jesus and becoming like him. In this episode of Behold, Tyler Hardy sits down with Hope and Kevin Valle to talk about God's ultimate purpose and how God's purpose changes the way we should live our day-to-day lives.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 1 of our new podcast called Behold. And we're so excited you're joining with us today in this conversation. And today I've got my friends Hope and Kevin Valle, and we're just so privileged to have them here today, get to hear some of their story. But today we're going to be talking about our purpose and really God's ultimate purpose for our lives. And so hopefully it'll be beneficial as you tune in today. So Hope and Kevin, thanks for being here. Before we jump into it, just give me the kind of 60, 90 second flyover, just kind of individually, who you guys are, what you're about.
Yeah. Well, my name's Hope, and this is my husband, Kevin. We have been coming to this church for about 10 years now for me. Fun fact, I'm actually 3 years older than Kevin, so
all right.
robbing the cradle over here. But we've been at this church for a long time. I came here to A&M for my undergrad and my master's degree. Kevin is a firefighter and paramedic for the city of Bryan. He's very proud of the fact that he works for Bryan.
Amen.
And I currently am a stay-at-home mom with our daughters. We have twin daughters who are 1 year old, 14 months old.
And they're a handful.
They're amazing.
Yeah,
they're so awesome. But I have a master's degree in international development, and that is what I'm truly passionate about. Yep. So hoping to start working in that industry before too long. But that's kind of what we're about these days.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's well said.
Well, just to honor you guys again, y'all have been here for a long time, and we just appreciate y'all coming on today to share a little bit, just your story. And I didn't think about the fact that, Hope, I know you've been here 10 years. Kevin, how long have you been here?
2012, so like 8?
8 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long time in the adult life.
Yeah.
And so just feel privileged you guys have spent a lot of those adult years here and even your formative college years, I would say. So, okay, well, hey, let's just jump into it. So again, we want to talk about God's ultimate purpose today. And so maybe, Kevin, just, when I say that phrase, kind of what comes to mind to you if I would say, hey, Kev, like, what is God's ultimate purpose for your life? Kind of how would you unpack that?
Yeah, so really, just very frankly, I feel like the purpose of my life, and it's taken years to feel like for me to be receptive to what God has been speaking, and not just revealing through his word, but through his spirit, and saying that my life is all about becoming more like Jesus and making him known. And I think really maybe a few years ago, I really got that, and to enough to where I got it tattooed on my arm. To say,
Let's go. Come on, show everybody.
I can show. I don't know which camera to show, but
he is for
it's
real.
Right there.
He's not
So
one of those.
If you forget, or if I forget, then it's such a good reminder. But no, really, that has been like something that has really been helpful, not just the tattoo, but in my heart to understand that, and no matter what I'm doing, no matter where I'm at with my family, and I know we'll get into it, but work, family, being a husband, like I just want to make Christ known, and you do that by becoming like Christ. And so understanding that is the ultimate purpose of my life, and now being married is our life, and for our children, like that is what we want to instill in them, is that, hey, there's a lot of awesome things about our world, but most importantly, like to become like Jesus and to make him known is like what is like first and foremost. So I'd say that's our purpose.
So Hope, just for you, I know a little bit about your kind of family and background, but just, when would you say it kind of dawned on you, like, I don't know, where was that crossroads moment where it dawned on you, hey, like, I think that I'm living for something more than just maybe what I see around me and my friends. We all have that point in time to when we kind of we're at that fork in the road, or we're in high school and we can grab after things, but when do you feel like kind of going back in time that you kind of said, you know what, I think I'm going to be about this?
Yeah. So I've had, I think, 2 defining moments in my life kind of on that path. And the first did come when I was in early high school. I think I was maybe 14 years old. And at the time, I was raised in a Christian home, and my parents had great theology and just did an amazing job of coaching us in meeting God, But I still was struggling with the purpose question. I mean, really, that question was at the core of my spiritual struggle, and just feeling I have always been pretty analytical and pretty skeptical by nature, and I don't know, I just got to start wondering, like, okay, were we even created by a being who intended us for anything specific, or are we a set of reproducing cells that just came from nowhere and is going nowhere? And so, I mean, it's pretty heady stuff for like a 14-year-old. I look back now and I'm like,
I was
oh
not
my
thinking
gosh,
about 14. I was thinking about hot dogs and hamburgers.
I don't
Basketball.
really know why, but it was amazing because it kind of forced the point, you know,
Sure.
like at a young age, where I was like, okay, I'm going to decide whether I'm about this or not. And so I feel like that was a pretty critical turning point for me. I went on my first mission trip around that age, and not maybe like the smartest idea to do when you're like kind of struggling with your faith. But for me, it turned out to be the grace of God. Wow. Because going on that trip, and I mean, it was a very evangelism oriented trip. I think I heard myself preach the gospel for the first time, and I believed it more in that moment than I ever had. And so that was really pivotal for me when I realized, like, okay, I believe this, and I believe it so much that it's something that I really do want to devote my life to sharing with people, and to knowing God and making him known. So that was huge. Wow. I didn't really know how to do that.
Sure.
So fast forward, 4-ish years, came to A&M and found this community, and this was the first time I had found a group of people who were living that way. And I remember hearing the story of this woman who's at our church, and it's actually, it's Corey Cordamont. She's amazing. I've told her that this story changed my life. She doesn't remember this, but I was a freshman, and I remember her telling me the story of how she was on a bus, and she felt prompted by God to stand up and share the gospel with the bus. This is a classic story, But to me, it was like mind-boggling, I was like, I can't believe she did that. She's so bold. And really, I mean, the main point was obedience, right? It's not like, we need to do that exact thing. She just was learning to hear the voice of God and obey in boldness. And that made a huge impact on me. And I remember that was one of the moments where I was like, okay, this is a community I can run with, who are committed to this mission. So those, not just that moment, but that whole season, really, college, the first couple years of college, and was extremely formative for me.
Wow. Yeah. I love that. I love someone else's boldness kind of causing you to say, are they crazy? Or maybe I should do the same thing, I love that. Kevin, what about you, man? Just kind of what obviously you care enough to get it tattooed on your arm, which makes me feel a little insecure. Maybe I need to do something here. But
hey, boldness can then
inspire
another.
To this podcast, I might rethink some things. But I think that just as a Hope sharing that, just kind of maybe just share a little bit about that from your own story. Just where did you hit that crossroads? Where, as you said at the beginning, hey, I want to really follow Jesus and make him known. Like, where did that kind of really settle in for you?
Yeah, I think for me, so I had a similar yet different, we can all say that, journey in that grew up, same thing, Christian home, went to church, 3 times a week, and knew a lot about God, but did not. I mean, one of the stories I even remember, I went to Impact back in 2012, which is great. I don't know if that's still around, but it was awesome. But I remember they did a breakout session. They were like, we're going to go do the quiet time. And I walked away, and I remember texting a friend like, so we're supposed to just sit silently? I'm being funny, but they were like, you're joking, right? And I'm like, yeah, of course. Super insecure. Because I'm like, I don't. And so I sat,
exactly what we're doing.
I sat in silence for an entire hour. Not praying, not meditating. It was like, I did not know what to do. I thought, we're supposed to be silent. So that really shows, at 17, didn't know what relationship meant, didn't know what spending time with God meant. And so really for me, you fast forward, and my parents did a really good job too of a lot of good fundamentals, a lot of good work ethic, but I just didn't understand the relationship part. Yep. And so it wasn't until I got to this community, and I mean, I've been here 8 years now, and I love every second of it. But I think for me, it was a moment where I was just doused with community, doused with amazing people for a semester. So back in 2012, 2013, and then I quickly went into the basic training for the Army. And that really is where it was all stripped away. And I realized quickly, like, wow. And I remember like trying to spend time with God because I'd learned, but I'd be in the laundry room in the middle of the night because your days were from about 4 a.m. to about 10 p.m. And then, you know, you try to sleep. And anyway, I just remember I clung a lot to the Psalms of David, where he would just either lament or pour his heart out. But I realized like, wow, community is amazing. Other like brothers and sisters are amazing, and it's actually needed. But what's most important is me and God connecting, and me and God, like him fully sustaining me. Yeah. And so I was gone for about only 4 months, which is pretty short, but being disconnected from the outside world, being disconnected from everything and your community, everything that you fell in love with, it really showed, okay, when everyone's away, what really matters and what's going to matter to me. And so for me, it took that moment to say, I need God, and I need him for so many different things, right? Identity, all these different things. But I knew is relationship with God, being, you know, sanctified by him. Yep. And, you know, I learned how to just be like Jesus. And, you know, it wasn't pretty, but I was very different than a lot of my peers. I mean, we're with, I don't even remember, 60 to 80 other, you know, G.I. Joe people, and you're all, you know, cramped into this one room to sleep. Yep. And you get to know about a lot of people and a lot of people's past, you know. And so I just remember throughout basic training being faced with, you know, they'd have certain conversations and they'd be like, well, what about you, Valle? And I was like, no, I don't like doing that, you know, and trying to learn how to defend, but my faith, yet just be open about my faith. And it was really opening for me, and eye-opening and just revealing to be like, wow, I not only don't have anyone to lean on but God, but I'm called to be set apart and different. And what does that mean? And so just learned a lot during basic training of like, my faith is real, and God, like a relationship with God is real. And it was so fun to begin to make him known in ways that I didn't think were maybe the most natural or the most, you know, just like usual. Yep. But throughout those 4 months, I mean, I can't tell you how many of those personal conversations I'd have with a guy where they're like, man, you said this a couple weeks ago and it stuck with me. Or like, why do you do the way, you know, why do you live the way you live? Or and they'd want to inquire because they were hungry and they were interested. And what they were interested in was relation with God and how to, you know, become like Jesus. And so I think that was a big turning point for me that, okay, it's possible to be in the world. It's possible to be in a worldly job or, you know, just serving in a place and fulfill the calling. And so God really woke that up in me, you know, that summer of 2013 to say, hey, this is possible with me and with community. And so from then, in the last 7 years or 8 years, has just been that journey of how in different seasons and different ways can I continue to live out that purpose. So I think God really woke that and birthed that fire in me at basic training. So good old Missouri, I have to
thank. That's powerful. I've never, hey, listen, I've been to camp with like 40 smelly teenagers, you know, but not like 60, 80 grown dudes that are just waking up and trying to learn how to be in the military. That's wild.
No, it's different.
You know, and I love what you said, just how, you know, you realize in that season, you couldn't lean on any other human. Yeah. You had to lean in on the Word of God, had to lean on God, like on Him. And, you know, how many times people feel like that, where it's like they look up, maybe they're in their family and they're the only person following Jesus. Yeah. And it's like they go home for Christmas and it's, you know, they don't really know what Christmas is about. It's about gifts and food. But here you are, and it's like all your family, you're the only person. Yeah. And you feel a little stuck, you know. And I think it's really cool how you chose to take that opportunity to say, well, I'm going to press into the Psalms because I got nowhere else to turn, you know, and I love you saying that. You know, I think maybe just, you know, obviously you guys are, how long have you been married for? How many years?
2.5.
2.5?
Today is our 3-year anniversary from when we started dating.
Wow, well, that's fun.
That gives you our timeline.
Dating 3 years ago, got married.
Everybody watching, you just got in the inside circle right here.
There it is.
With the Valles. Okay, so that's been a lot's happened in the last few years, I feel like. So let me maybe ask it this way. So obviously we're talking about, okay, God's ultimate purpose. Here we go. We're talking about to be like Jesus, to make him known. So so maybe Hope, speaking this a little bit just on, okay, you know, you chose to go through to get your master's. And so, sometimes I think that people think that maybe even as Christians, we say, hey, well, of course I know, like being a Christian is to be Christ-like. So of course I know, it's kind of like a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. But I think that people struggle with the application of actually being Christ-like. Mm-hmm. Like, it's kind of like when we talk about prayer. I know I should pray. I don't really know how to do that, but I know it's a good thing to do. So I know being Christ-like is the right thing, but how do I do that if it's not in church or like at a Bible study or if I'm like, can you actually, is that an everyday thing? So maybe just talk a little bit about you getting your master's, you graduate from A&M, you go into grad school. Just maybe unpack a little bit about that in terms of, okay, God's ultimate purpose / how are you being like Christ while going through grad school? Because a lot of people, they go through education, whether it's high school, college, or beyond. So how do you really become more like him when you're there in the academia world?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. When I went to grad school, I think I subconsciously thought that it would be a lot of people just like me in my program, So I studied international development. I mean, it's a public service school that I went to here. And so it's definitely going to attract the sort of people who they're not trying to make $1 million. It's not a money-making industry, but people who just have a tender heart, a bleeding heart for the world and the people who are needy in the world, which is those who live in underdeveloped countries. And so I kind of thought there would be a lot of Christians and a lot of people who were like very serious and devoted to this. And I mean, I was kind of just surprised to find out that it was just ordinary people who were kind of stumbling their way through life. There were some Christians, but majority were not. And which was really fascinating because I was wondering to myself, what is your motivation? Why do you want to pour out your life for people who are so needy and not get anything in return? But it was really good for me because it just made me realize, like, okay, in every single industry, every single one, not just, we all kind of think, oh, Wall Street, that's where all like the bad secular people are, greedy people. It's like, no, every single industry, even the one that is driven by compassion, there are people working in that industry who are so needy themselves. And wow. And, and before they start their careers, they go to school just like you. So I think that was really, really good for me. And I mean, I think work ethic was a huge thing. If you try to think, what kind of language do these people speak? If they're not spiritual themselves and they're not Christians themselves, what do they understand? Well, they understand if you have a good work ethic and if you are just good at your job, good at in class and being responsible, being a good group mate and things like that. And so I really tried very hard to be excellent and try to minister to people that way, Yes. Yeah. And have a positive attitude. Oh my goodness, negativity in school is just like, it's like people just live off of coffee and negativity. And they're like, I don't know, just think that they can suck something out of the people around them by complaining. And it's so rampant. And so for you to make a very deliberate stand against that, that's a testimony. Like that is, you are showing people Jesus. Yes, totally. Yes. And I got a lot of people asking me about that, like how are you not crumbling under the stress and pressure of finals? They're about to, destroy our life. And just get to tell them.
And while you're like 6 months pregnant.
Yeah, I was pregnant.
Way to go. You're pregnant. Oh my gosh. Yes.
But you just get to tell them. I mean, seriously, I had so many conversations that went like this. I was like, well, actually, I have a sense of meaning and purpose that is not based on my performance. And I know that God is real and he loves me no matter how I do. And people, it just is like, that blows their mind. And then you're able to share more with them about Jesus. So,
yeah, way to go. Well, it sounds like, which is nothing new, but especially I think this day and age, we live in a very critical day and age. I mean, not just critical thinking. I think it's just become critical. It's just become negative, right? Yeah. And Kevin, I know that you're a firefighter, and although different, but it seems like maybe some similar environments you're in of, hey, there's negativity and that kind of stuff, right? So just, I mean, okay, so here you are. I mean, you are a man's man. You're a firefighter. Like every little boy's dream is like, can I get on the ladder and drive the big red truck? I've never met a little boy who doesn't want to go get on the fire truck. Yeah. They all mind it. They want to go on it. They don't know all the work that goes into it. Right, yeah. But they just sign up. Okay, so you're a firefighter right now. I mean, how are you actually demonstrating like Christ likeness? I mean, it seems like you're motivated. Like you're in the, you talked about the 4 months of basic training. You are motivated to be like Jesus, even in the midst of an environment that's very difficult. Yeah. And now insert yourself for your job. And it's not that, I mean, there's some great guys and stuff, but like, it's an intense environment. And it's not even just the guys you work with. It's the calls you're making. I mean, it is life and death, and it's false alarms, and it's every day. I think you shared with me once that, I don't know, you said something to the effect of, if everybody in America saw the text that I get about the emergency calls and trauma going on, they would just be undone. Yeah. And I was like, I think it's fair. I don't think I want to get all those texts, because I don't know if I can handle that. But I mean, help us understand, like, how are you handling that with the pressure, the life and death reality, the coworkers, that environment? You do these 24-hour crazy shifts, whatever. I mean, just unpack, man, where are you finding Jesus in that? And how are you able to keep your head up, not just above water, but where you're free? Kind of like Hope is saying, where they look and they're like, man, what's wrong with you? What's different about you,
Yeah. Man, so that, I could probably take like a whole hour on it, as it is, but no, honestly, it has been very, I keep saying eye-opening. And really one of the phrases I feel like God had given me a couple months back, or maybe it was a year ago now, but he gave me this sweet phrase of how he has a lot of invitation for me in my life at that time. So it was like right when we had our kids, and I felt like over and over again, God would just share that all the time throughout, whether it's work or at home, he is constantly extending invitation. And so that is very real in my job, where there's constant moments where I have an invitation from God to either be like Jesus, and walk by the Spirit, or do things that I feel called or that I know are right, and that would honor God, or reject an invitation and just walk in my flesh, or fall into the gossip, or the negativity mindset, or anything like that. And so that is constant throughout the 24-hour period. I mean, I've, like I said, I could go on and on, but I feel like I have become more aware of even just our spiritual realm. We don't talk about that a lot. It can be kind of weird, but in my job, I feel like the spiritual realm is so real that, I mean, we have sayings, right? In public service, or even really in emergency medicine, superstition, all sorts of those things, like what you say or what you don't say, those are very real things. And so people have phrases like black cloud or a white cloud. And anyway, I just have learned so much even about more of God, and like how I can, the authority of God, asking things of God. So all those things that you learn so much. But one of the things I feel like God highlighted as you were asking that, in that sense of, okay, how do I do this? Where's the invitation here? Yeah. I mean, and be able to take that second. So obviously, I believe it's, John 15, that's very real. It's like, if I'm not abiding in God, like especially before work, attaching myself to the vine, I will drown. I mean, and Hope could attest. I mean, there are days that have been harder than others, but even just not, whether it's calls or internal conflict, but like the spiritual weight or the spiritual attack really is so real. That is like, if I do not attach myself to God, whether it's like getting time with him in the morning or throughout my day, playing worship music on, all those little things that can just seem like the mundane, or you do that as a Christian, that is like my lifeline. And it's so real, because I notice the days that if I'm not attached, it's not good. Like, even just like, I'm not saying, like, when I say not good, like, I'll just feel like maybe a sense of depression, or, like you'll feel these things because of what's actually going on around you. So that has been really real in learning, wow, I have to abide and attach myself to the vine, because I will not be able to properly function, whether it's on a call to a patient, to my fellow coworker, my partners, my station, my crew, everyone, my wife when I come home. Right. So those invitations are constant. So being attached to the vine has been huge. And like I said, and then just being open to what the Holy Spirit has to say. And the one story I feel like God reminded me, and if I can shorten it, but there was a moment where I felt like we were on a call and it wasn't anything traumatic, but something needed to be done and I didn't do it as my operator had expected me to do it, or how he would have had it done.
Yeah.
How it led was something didn't get done. We get in the engine, it's all four of us, and he just starts, ripping me a new one in front of everyone. Like we have these headsets on and he's just like, why would you do that? Why, just kind of ripping me a new one. I was like, and I felt my first invitation was like, okay, just, that sense of turn the other cheek, like you just let it ride.
Sure, right.
Where all of you wants to like defend yourself, be private, and be like, I'm also a man too, and so I just let it go and run its course. And we get to the station, and this is like hour 3 of a 24-hour period. So it's
it's gonna be a long.
We're not going anywhere for another 22 hours or whatever, 21 hours. So, but the second invitation, it was really sweet. But and I knew his heart. But the guy next to me, he's a more veteran than I am, but he kind of wanted to build this camaraderie of like, hey, you don't need to listen to him. I said, hey man, I know where you're coming from, but I don't want to talk about him while he's gone, because he had already left the engine.
Yeah.
So that was like my invitation number 2 of like, hey, let's honor him still. Because he's not here, you don't need to gossip about him or anything like that. So little things, but those quick moments to say, okay, I don't need to talk to you about him. I appreciate you extending help. I'm going to go take care of this, So my third invitation was go talk to him. That's where you start to like, I don't really want to obey or listen, or be humble. And really how it ended was I go to his office, I knock on his door. I said, hey man, can I talk to you real quick? And I felt an invitation not to close the door. I was just going to leave it open. I sit down. And how it started was I said, hey, I want to just tell you, really, one, I'm not justifying myself, but I'm going to place honor on you real quick, which that's not a phrase that we would use in my field, And so I just start to say, hey, I'm going to place honor on you. This is how I view you as an operator, and others view you as an operator. And, I just, not puffing him up, I said, this is what I've seen, and I respect how you work and your work ethic and all these things, and you're a leader and all these things. And I'm placing honor on honor and honor. And then I said, but now I'm going to tell you, not in a way of justifying myself, but I want you to know what my thought process was. And so I just share my heart, and say, hey, this is kind of why this went down. And so anyway, we have this conversation, and literally has this moment where you could just tell like these blinders fell off. And he's like, I am so sorry that I did that to you.
Wow.
And he's like, I have never had anyone tell me from that way how they were thinking. He just started to repent essentially and be like, will you forgive me for like taking it that way? And so I just got to say, hey, yeah, of course. Wow. And I said, look, I was like, I understand we're going to be working together for another 21 hours. I didn't want this to, because that's how that happens, right? That seed of bitterness or judgment or whatever. There. And like, and then guys carry that for 20 years where they'll bring up, hey, remember that guy? And you're like, I don't like that guy. And you're like, why? You don't really know. Yes. Well, it's because he chewed you out 20 years ago in the engine, And so what was really sweet is we mended, we repented, we forgave each other. And it was like, hey, we're going to do better next time. I now know how you think, you know how I think. Let's do better, right? We're on the same team. I walk out and that same guy who was trying to connect with me, literally, he was like, I've been here 15 years. I've never heard a new guy go to an operator and do what you did. And you could tell it blew his mind. And so like in matter of minutes, I felt like heaven came to earth for a second because of many invitations,
Sure.
And that is like all day, every day in so many different ways. But those are those moments that I don't accept every invitation, with a happy heart. I don't accept them with joy every time. But when God begins to reveal his faithfulness through those moments, you start to see the outweighing of, I want to choose those invitations because it's bringing the presence of God, it's ushering in forgiveness and repent. All these things that we read about can be possible and attainable if we choose to accept those invitations. So I think that was the biggest thing, is if I'm not attached and I'm not accepting his invitations, then I'm not going to be fulfilling his purpose,
It sounds like you're just, I love hearing you. One, it's encouraging again to realize that no matter where someone's coming from or how hard an environment is, like God's in the business of softening hearts. He's in the business of, and he's given us the playbook how to do it, which is to humble ourselves. It says, right, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. You humbled yourself, went before your officer or operator, and all of a sudden the door was opened. It's like the door doesn't open with pride. It's always shut. But the door opens with humility. So I love you sharing that. And I think, just to reiterate, man, I love the mindset of whether it's invitations or just looking for opportunities. And that what I hear both of you guys saying is, hey, whether I was in grad school or firefighter, what my job is, I'm looking for opportunities because there's opportunities every day. And I think that's a reminder for us as believers to understand that God is actually presenting opportunities, invitations every day. Like there won't be a day that there's not one. Now, the question is, are we looking for them? Right. Are we kind of, you said, are we abiding in that John 15 or are we going to miss them? And I think that's what I hear from you guys. Y'all are trying to position your lives and mindsets in a way to say, no, we're going to look for opportunities. And there's a bit of a waiting game, but I think you're ready. That's what I hear you guys. Like you're ready to pounce, when something happens. I kind of want to just kind of ask you guys a couple last questions here and before we wrap up today. But one, we're going to get to your kids in a moment. So Kevin wants you to share that story you were mentioning beforehand in a moment. But because I think it's really, really powerful, because I think we can minimize what it looks like to be like Christ and to make him known and we kind of think, well, God's purpose is I must do this kind of big, glorious thing. But really it's a bunch of little things adding up, right? It's the faithful in the little, right? He who's faithful in the little will be ruled over much. Yeah. It's the faithful steps day to day, which is what you hear you guys saying. So Hope, though, I can't let you get out of here without sharing just a little bit of the window of like, okay, let's take the tattoo on Kevin's arm here, make him known. Mm-hmm. And I know you well enough to know that obviously, like God has put in a way, like God's heart for people don't know him, who've never heard the gospel, never heard the story of forgiveness, is very much part of your life and your story this last decade. So maybe just share a little bit of bring us in a little bit of the journey, a couple decisions you made along the way in your life as like action steps, because we don't want to just talk. Mm-hmm. We want to be men and women of action. And so what are a couple things you've done over the years to take steps to say, hey, I want to actually position myself to be in an environment to where I can make him known, maybe to people never heard.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, I think the most obvious practical response to that question is that you have to put yourself around people who are lost. You have to find unbelievers. And let me tell you, there are plenty of them. They just might not.
Everywhere.
They're probably not in your life group. They may be. I hope you have at least one or two in your life group. But most likely they're not. And so shortly after I got involved at Antioch, when I came to college, I started participating. Actually, this might have even been before I started coming to the church, but I picked up a flyer for the Atheist and Agnostic student group when I were at one of the MSC open houses or something like that. And I started going to those meetings. I actually studied philosophy in my undergrad. And so I already mentioned I'm kind of heady in that way sometimes. And and so I went there not to just preach or whatever, but just to be around people who had a radically different worldview than my own. And I think one of the biggest things that did for me was just break my heart for people who don't know him. And so that was huge. That was one thing. I fell in love with the nations when I was in college and actually lived in among a very unreached people group in East Asia for a year. And this people group is actually not only unreached, but they are extremely oppressed right now and very marginalized. And they kind of have like this, their prison walls are twofold in that their government regime is a very anti-religion, but then also it's a Muslim people group. And so culturally they have that going against them. And anyway, it just feels impossible, to reach these people with the gospel. But I think that was also a hugely important experience for me because living there, I was just confronted with my own doubt and asking myself, like, can God reach these people? Yeah. Does he love them enough, to die for them? And even while they're not turning to him and repenting. And so I think those experiences, again, and I'm kind of extreme in that way. I'm kind of like, if I'm going for it, let's go all the way. Yeah. But I think we could all do with a little bit more radical action in our lives. And so you think somebody is, quote unquote, too hard to reach with the gospel, man, I encourage you to go after them. And we're looking for hunger. You don't want to waste your time on someone who's not hungry. But those experiences were extremely formative for me. But I will say, you know, when I first moved to Asia, I remember within the first week, I lived by myself, you know, in my apartment on the 28th floor of this high rise. I did not speak the language. And I remember just sitting there and being like, okay, oh, well, what now? I'm a missionary. Like, here I am. I'm a missionary. And then it just kind of occurred to me, oh, you know what I'm doing here is I'm just living normal life. Like, I don't know. We have this stigma about being a missionary, a full-time missionary, and you realize you're like, okay, it's just you do your normal things. You get up and spend time with God, and you go grocery shopping, and you talk to your neighbors, and you babysit your kids' friends or your friends' kids and things like that. And I kind of started realizing, like, wow, I really could have done better to practice living intentionally in the U.S. You know, like it would have felt even that much more seamless overseas. And so now that I'm a stay-at-home mom, man, I think about that a lot because, I mean, you talked about, like, you mentioned it's 100 tiny moments throughout your day. But really that is what it is for me. I mean, I'm asking myself all the time, Kevin knows, I'm just like, what am I doing with my life? You know, I've had all these experiences and my heart is set on fire and I got my master's degree and now I feel like I cook all day, you know? It's like my kids wake up and they need a meal and then they take a nap and they wake up and they need a snack and then they need another meal and then they need a snack and a meal, you know? And
you definitely know they're my kids because all three of us
all the time,
so much. But I feel bad.
Man, I feel like I'm wasting away, and so that conviction you just need to know, you need to believe that I was made to do this, you know, that I have purpose and meaning in my life, even when it doesn't look like X, Y, or Z. Comparison will just destroy you. It will, even comparison to your own life, even comparison to my life 5 years ago versus what it is now. Like that harms me. And, but believing like, okay, everything is meaningful. And when I spend time with God and show his love to my kids, when I'm kind to the cashier, you know, these things are all like contributing to glorifying God and making him known and advancing the kingdom of heaven and bringing it to earth. So I think I just kind of went on a big tangent there.
No, I love your tangents, you know, and there's a lot, I mean, there's a lot that you've been able to experience that I think a lot of people haven't, you know, and you have perspective of whatever the draw is to life of a missionary or ministry, or people think about, I wish I was a pastor, and I'm like, I don't know if you want to do that. It's actually it's a little more difficult than maybe you think, you know. That until we have those experiences, we don't have that perspective. But I think in hearing you share. You know, someone years ago shared with me as we started having kids, and they said, you know, you have to remember your greatest disciples will be your children. Those are the ones going to be with you when you're old, you know, and it hit me, oh, wow, like discipleship's a lot of work. Like this parenting is a lot of work. It's not just feeding. It's the other 101 things you got to do to help them mature into a human that can live life and be okay, you know, and so it is an investment, and the majority of parenting is in the secret place. Nobody sees, nobody knows. Especially for a mom, it's like the majority of that time's in the secret place. And, you know, just to encourage anyone listening out there, it's like, especially if you're a mom, it's like your reward, you get to see and tangibly experience some of the reward in your kids and life. But I really do think that reward is way greater in heaven. There's so many things that, because even your children will never know the sacrifice you made. But he does, you know, and I think that there is so much purpose in that, and that, you know, your kids don't stay the same age forever. They actually get bigger every day. and then one day they just leave. So I just want to encourage you guys. Think you're doing awesome. Maybe just one last thing, and if any final thoughts for you guys. But Kevin, just share a little bit about a story as we're on to parenting and children. Especially when you have little kids, it can be kind of, what am I doing? But just let's tie it back into this theme of, okay, how are you going to be like Jesus as a dad with your tiny itty bitty babies? Share with us that story you had.
Yeah. So with that story, I'll just say the story first. So the example is, so we have twins, right? We've established that for people that didn't get that.
On the same day.
Same day.
2 newborn infants.
Yeah. Which, even in that was like, I was telling our life group, our guys, our discipleship group the other day, and they were getting PhDs and trying to figure out kids and stuff. And I told them, I was trying to use that illustration, even as Chris Pletcher used it. Decisions or obedience with God is like that sheet of paper. You pass it, or that door frame, you step through, and boom, you're like, it wasn't that hard. I was like, I felt like for that was, okay, God, we'll have a kid. Right? We feel obedient. She's finishing her degree, her master's, all this stuff. And it's like, let's just step through the door. Oh, awesome. And then it was like 2 kids. And we were like, I didn't think we were signing up for that. So the example is, the first 4 months of their life was definitely, I think for us, but mainly for me, the hardest season of my life. I mean, I don't feel like I've had hardships and stuff, but like just the toll of a being, right? Like the sleepless nights, this like you're pouring out to something that does not give back other than puke, poop, and crying, And so I think I just hit this point where in the fog, right? That's what I felt like. It was like, I'm not even working out. I'm not really eating well. We're in this fog of trying to figure out parenting 2 kids.
Mode.
Oh, absolutely. I'm more like drowning mode. But I just remember this moment where I don't know, maybe I got some time with God that morning, or I don't remember the context, but I just remember one of my daughters, Rhema Truth, she's our firstborn. She looks pretty much like me. So I think we have this bond, but she was just losing it. I don't know, I think we had cleaned her, fed her, she had napped. But I think she might have been gone.
Who knows?
Maybe she stepped outside. I don't know. But I just remember I'm by myself with this itty bitty child. She's maybe a couple weeks or a month old, and she's just screaming. And it's those, like, you hear kids scream, it's one thing. But something about my own kids screaming, there's this point in the back of my head that just flares. And so anyway, I finally, I can't do anything else. I'm like, I've done all that I can do, that I know what to do. And so in the midst of her screaming at me, I pick her up and I'm looking at her face. I might be crying at this point. I cried so many times, but I'm staring at Rhema's face and I was like, Rhema, you are making me more like Jesus every day.
Wow.
And I think what God was really doing in that moment was revealing to me that there's so much of me that he is sanctifying and just purging that's what I needed. Yeah. And I was telling earlier, I was like, I thought I was a patient man, thought I had a lot of self-control. I'm very peaceful. I don't really get angry. But my kids, even in their first couple weeks and couple months of life, really exposed every weakness that I had. Everything that did not look like Jesus was just being exposed. Like I felt so transparent because of just the simple truth of parenting. And so that moment was really big for me to go, okay, this is one moment of just like jobs, everything we've talked about. This is one moment, one defining moment that there will be many more like it, where through my children now is a new realm of mine, a new way to learn. I can choose to be more like Jesus, right? Because I could react in the flesh. I could do all these things that I know I shouldn't do, but I have this opportunity to love unconditionally, to pour out, to be humble, to be gentle, all these aspects of who Jesus was. I've had so many since then, but that moment was huge for me to be like, okay, that's all she's doing. She's sharpening me, whether she even knows it. And I can't wait to share. I mean, I'll have to, I guess, share this podcast with her, but she'll know that story. I'm like, Rhema, in the wake of your screaming was sharpening. Yes. It was getting those rough edges of my life is not my own. And I am solely here, not just to serve and support my wife and now my children and, make him known to those around me. But it's like, I want to be more and more like him through all of these moments. So that is the story of Rhema sharpening me.
Man, It's always just sometimes it's overwhelming to think about, our children and their impact on us and the reality of what it takes in those early days. I can remember holding one of, I forgot which one it was, but one of them, and it was every night trying to go to bed, they had to be consoled. And so it was one of us holding them like a football. And remember that you couldn't hold them on their back. They would just scream. The only way to get them to calm down, you had to flip them over, hold them on their tummy like a football, and I'd literally have to walk around like this. And I remember, I think it's where my back started getting bad, honestly, but I'm walking around, and it's 30 minutes, it's an hour, and you're just like in your arm, and you're starting to think, God, this cannot be the way. This just, you can't go forever. And, eventually it stops, and it changes everything. But I remember those days, and then even as you're sharing, it just made me think about, okay, as we're desiring to be more like Jesus, the reality is He knows us so well that even like with my child, He knows if we need to be on our back or our tummy, and He's that intimate, He's that close with us to even know when I put you in a situation or position or a job, or I give you twins instead of one. He probably knew one was too easy. And he's like, no, we gotta get somewhere, And he probably knew that he wanted to have these little twins so that they could run up and run together and become besties. He's beyond us, right? But for us, in the moment, Lord, I'm drowning. Was this part of your plan?
And if I could tell you, honestly, there was a moment. Again, I shared this with guys at Life Group, but I don't think this is too much. But I was going to take a shower, one of those moments, because it was the only place of solitude. It's like I'm alone,
no one's screaming at me,
and all I'm hearing is the rain of water over me. But honestly, again, back to I'm an emotional guy to some degree, but I remember just weeping one time because I was like, I haven't eaten, I'm whatever my excuses were. But I remember having this moment multiple times where I was like, God, you picked the wrong person, honestly. And I was like, I can't do this. Yeah. In those moments, those hard moments, I was like, just remember telling God, I can't do this. And God would just so faithfully be like, I know. Alone, you can't do it. Right. But with me, right? If we're talking about this whole purpose, you're not supposed to do it alone. Not only did I give you a more than suitable helper who is also feeling the same way you are, but I'm the most best helper that you need, right? Through the Holy Spirit and through all those things. So you remind me of that story too, where it's like, man, there will be moments with whether it's your children, your job, or whatever it might be in marriage, but when you feel that point of I don't think I can do it, and we're like, well, that's okay for us to be that sober reminder of we are not supposed to do it apart, just on our own brute strength, right? Because we can kind of get lost, I think, in our culture too. It's the bootstrap imagery. And so anyway, that in the process of making Him know and being like Jesus, it's like you should and will probably get to a moment where you're like, I don't think I was made for this. But understanding that it was only by God's design to make you more like His Son. Because that's,
Amen.
Yeah, so.
Well, guys, it's been so helpful to hear from y'all today. Hope, any final thoughts? Any last words you want to share with us today before we end our episode?
I've just been thinking about the passage in Philippians 3 that talks about I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus. And if I had to summarize just in one sentence or one passage, I think that would be it, that it's worth it. It really is worth it. And I feel so young and I've lived hardly any life, but just the perspective of okay, I really have been deliberately, intentionally following Jesus for a decade, done some really hard things and experienced some hard things, experienced tragedy and loss and transition and pain and sacrifice, and it is worth it, to know Jesus, and from that place of the overflow of love in our hearts to help others know Him as well. I mean, He's the greatest treasure on this planet, and He's not to be withheld. So it's worth it. And I know that there are so many people, hundreds and thousands and even millions of people on planet Earth today who would say the same thing, but just to add our voice to that chorus and encourage us all to pursue Him with our whole hearts.
Amen. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for just sharing some of your story. It's so helpful. And for everybody watching, just grateful for tuning in. And again, my encouragement is just, everyone has their own story, and God's going to take you on a journey. But his ultimate desire is for you to know him and to really make him known. So again, thanks guys for being here. I appreciate y'all. Thankful for you. And we'll see you next week.